As anticipated, China has fallen short of its pledge to purchase U.S. goods according to the U.S.-China Phase 1 trade deal that was signed under former President Trump. Here to discuss what that means and the implications of it all, we have Dennis Shea, who is an executive director at the Bipartisan Policy Center. Dennis Shea, thank you so much for joining us on the Capitol Report.
Great to be here. Thanks, Steve.
Now, Dennis, today the U.S. Census Bureau released trade data from 2021. Just as expected, it shows a significant shortfall in China's pledge to increase purchases of U.S. goods and services under the Phase 1 trade deal signed by former President Trump. Can you explain how this trade deal works and the enforcement mechanisms, if any, that might be in place?
Sure, Steve. First of all, there's a dispute resolution process built into the deal where involving a series of consultations between the Chinese authorities and the USTR and U.S. authorities, and starting at the deputy USTR level, going up to the USTR level. So if one party feels that the other party is not abiding by the agreement, they bring that to the attention of the other party. In this case, the U.S. presumably is bringing this to the attention of the Chinese authorities, that they have not lived up to their purchasing commitments within the agreement. And if there's no satisfactory resolution, the aggrieved party, the complaining party, is entitled under the agreement to take remedial action that's proportionate to what is the violation. And ultimately, either party can withdraw from the agreement if they feel that the other party is just not abiding by it.
Now, China's trade surplus with the U.S. seems to have surged to about $400 billion in 2021. This is according to Chinese customs data. With that said, why do you think our trade deficit with China continues to increase?
Well, there are very critical structural problems within the Chinese economy that the United States has been complaining about for many, many years now. The Phase 1 trade deal attempted to address some of those issues with respect to intellectual property, forced technology transfer, but there are other elements of the economy that, in terms of state enterprises, massive subsidization of these national champions, Chinese national champions that are funded by state-owned banks that are pursuing state-created industrial policies, and they're benefiting, frankly, from state-owned cyber espionage and intellectual property theft. I mean, these structural problems within the Chinese economy are massive and huge. It was the hope of the Trump administration to have another bite at the apple, potentially, in a Phase 2 portion of the dream. But it's clear that the good thing that the Trump administration did under the leadership of Bob Lighthizer was finally sort of bring these issues out to the fore and really attempt to take action. And it demonstrated, the Chinese did come to the table, and it demonstrated that the only way to get their attention is, frankly, to impose some costs on their actions. And if you're not willing to impose costs, then you're probably unlikely to change behavior.
Now, Dennis, during the Trump era, you served as Deputy U.S. Trade Representative and U.S. Ambassador to the World Trade Organization. You understand China very well, and you're also experienced in dealing with Chinese officials. So what advice would you give to the Biden administration in dealing directly with Beijing?
Well, I would say hang tough, show strength. Again, I think the Chinese understand costs. You have to be willing to impose costs. Sometimes imposing costs also costs you a bit. But if you feel the goal is worth pursuing, then be strong and take it.
Now, I just want to ask you this last question. This past December marked the 20th anniversary since China joined the World Trade Organization. Do you think that was a mistake?
Well, clearly it was, I have to say, unfortunately. China just has not lived up to its commitments that it made when it acceded. its system, its state-led, non-market economic system is completely incompatible with WTO norms of transparency, openness, market orientation grounded in the rule of law. These are the norms, the values that are supposed to underpin the multinational trading system and the WTO. And clearly, China's economic system is incompatible with those sets of norms.
Dennis Shea, thank you.
Thank you.
At least 4 states are ending statewide mask mandates in schools within a month. Connecticut, Delaware, New Jersey, and Oregon are among the 4 states. Governor Phil Murphy of New Jersey, a Democrat, said that this is not a declaration of victory as much as an acknowledgement that we can responsibly live with the virus. In Virginia, Democratic Senator Chap Peterson is promising to help pass a law stopping school districts from forcing students to wear masks. He says forced masking in schools violates the U.S. Constitution's First Amendment. New Omicron cases and hospitalizations are dropping, and states are evaluating which restrictions to keep and which to change. Many people see the lifting of school mask mandates as a significant step toward a normal school environment for children. And Senator Bill Hagerty of Tennessee and a group of his GOP colleagues are leading the SNOOP Act. That's the Stop the Nosy Obsession with Online Payments Act. Hagerty says the Biden administration is invading Americans' lives and finances and hindering small businesses. The act seeks to eliminate a new tax code provision in the American Rescue Plan. The provision requires third-party payment processors like PayPal and Venmo to report users' business transactions exceeding $600 to the IRS. Senator Rick Scott says the current tax code drives up the cost of operation for small businesses and independent contractors. Science advisor Dr. Eric Lander, a member of Biden's cabinet, has resigned. An investigation found evidence he spoke to colleagues disrespectfully. Dr. Eric Lander formerly served as the director of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. He resigned on Monday evening following a White House investigation. In his resignation statement, he said that disrespect was never his intention, but that he takes responsibility. Reporters grilled White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki on why Biden didn't fire Lander after the incident. This was referencing Biden's previous promise to terminate anyone on his team immediately for such behavior.
It was because of this policy and this process that when the complaint was filed, a full and thorough investigation was conducted pursuant to that policy.
In another case surrounding free speech, a pastor sharing his journey away from homosexuality was censored by social media. Also targeted, he says, is his faith. NTD's Iris Tao with more on this man's fight.
So justices of the United States Supreme Court, today I implore, I beg you, take my case.
Pastor Jim Dahman, leader of a nationwide Christian ministry, is asking the U.S. Supreme Court to hear an appeal of his lawsuit against Vimeo. He is filing a petition with the High Court this week.
Don't allow monopolies to destroy America.
The streaming service suspended Dahman's account in 2018 for sharing his and others' stories of walking away from homosexuality to pursue their Christian faith.
And he changed my heart and changed my mind and changed my identity and brought back to who he originally designed me to be, the man that I am today and have been for the past 10 years.
Vimeo cited its policy against what LGBT advocates call harmful conversion therapy. But the pastor's attorney says Dahman, who is now married to a woman and has 3 kids, was simply sharing his true life story.
I mean, his video is not harassing. It's not lewd. It's not filthy, you know? This is his testimony. This is his truth.
This case, the group says, is another example of how big tech is hiding behind Section 230, which essentially shields social media platforms like Vimeo from free speech requirements governing more traditional media outlets.
A perfect example why Section 230 needs to be reversed is because There's videos all over the internet of I used to be straight, but now I'm gay. They're all over. But if you go the other direction, I was gay, now I'm straight, that goes against the cultural norms of this day, and they're being censored.
Dahmen's appeal comes after his case was struck down by lower courts, which endorsed Vimeo's immunity, citing Section 230. But Dahmen says he's not giving up because it's not just about him.
It states it's about every American, anyone. The internet companies, like a communist, like a dictator, can delete and eliminate you from existence.
The Supreme Court is expected to get back to them within a month. Meanwhile, the group says they expect more people with similar stories to come forward around the country. Reporting in D.C., Iris Tao, NTD News.
Pastor Jim Doman says that about 20 years ago, he was living a homosexual life with his partner when he had a moment with God and decided to change. Doman went on to become a pastor and married his wife and started a family. Pastor Doman took his ministry online, where he was eventually censored on the video platform called Vimeo. As you just saw, Pastor Doman was at the Supreme Court today, appealing to have his case heard. We had a chance to sit down with the pastor earlier. Pastor Jim Doman, thank you for joining us on the Capitol Report.
It's great to be here, Steve. Thanks for having me on your show.
Absolutely. Now, Pastor, you were just at the Supreme Court not too long ago holding a news conference regarding a case that you were involved in. You want to appeal that case against Vimeo, the video platform. Can you tell us a little bit about this case and what's going on?
Absolutely. So I founded Church United in October of 2016. And it's a ministry to pastors, helping them engage in government, helping them engage in culture. And Church United would tell the story through video of different pastors, how we've impacted them, how they're changing their cities, how they're changing their communities, their counties. So they were pastoral stories. Well, one of those stories was my story. I'm a former homosexual. I shared my testimony of coming to Christ, sharing how I transitioned from, or changed from, a homosexual to a heterosexual, and more or less told my story. Vimeo reached out to me and said, you're in violation of our terms. We're going to terminate your account, delete your videos, not just your story, but there's potentially 5 other videos. But we're not just going to only target you because of your sexual orientation. We're going to wipe out 89 videos, 3 years of our nonprofit work of pastors sharing their stories.
And under what grounds did Vimeo try to do this on? Did they give you any explanation?
So Vimeo sent me an email, and I responded back. I'm assuming it was their legal department. I said, please help me understand. I'm a former homosexual. Why are you doing this to me? And they said, you're in violation of our terms of your agreement, and because of this, we're not only going to delete your video and these 4 other videos, we're going to completely delete and wipe out your account.
Now, I want to ask you a bit of a personal question. Sure. You say that you were a former homosexual. Yes. What was it that made you change your mind to become heterosexual?
I would say it was through a variety of traumatic experiences. But I grew up a Christian, evangelical, and one night my partner and I had gotten into a fight. And I said, I'm going to leave. And, I kind of went out on my own, and he had switched all of our bank accounts, everything, and really was left with nothing because he took all the money out of our accounts and put it in with his name only. And that night, I just said, God, I'm yours again. And I didn't have any money. I only had debt on credit cards. So I just said, God, I'm yours again. And through a series of events, I moved back home with my parents and was able to reconnect with my dad, and really had the desire I wanted to get married and have a family, and really sought the Lord, and is this a possibility for me to do that? And I've been out of the lifestyle for 20 years this June, and I've been married to my wife, Amanda, 13 years in July.
Wow. So, I think there's a lot of heterosexual people, homosexual people that are under the impression that you're born one way or the other. What do you say to that? Obviously, you're defying that logic.
Yeah, it is not something that's innate. It's not immutable. People are not born a homosexual. They're not born transgender. They're not born lesbian. It's environment. It's development. Now, the left will say the opposite. Oh, I'm born this way, God, because, well, you had a psychological experience, a defensive detachment order with the same-sex parent, or some type of trauma that shifted you at an age you weren't cognizantly aware of what was going on as a child. And so and part of this, there's a whole whole movement of former LGBTQ people who have left those lifestyles, and change is possible.
Pastor Jim Doman, thank you.
Thank you for having me. God bless you.
Congressman Jamie Raskin has been accused of failing to disclose stocks owned by his wife. This is in violation of U.S. law. The American Accountability Foundation sent a complaint saying Sarah Bloom Raskin sold almost 2,000 shares in a Colorado tech firm in December of 2020. But Congressman Raskin did not report the sale until August of 2021. The sale made the Raskins $1.5 million richer. The law requires members of Congress to disclose trades made by themselves, their spouses, or their dependent children, publicly and quickly. The laws on this were strengthened in 2012 after a wave of congressional insider trading. Representative Raskin has acknowledged he took too long to file the financial disclosure, but said it was in part due to the death of his son around the same time. The watchdog group says this is understandable, but says that tragedy didn't slow the Democratic congressman's efforts in leading impeachment proceedings against President Trump. Sarah Bloom Raskin was recently nominated by President Joe Biden for a top banking regulatory position at the Federal Reserve.